The arrest of the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski was only made possible because of his brother, David Kaczynski. In 1995, David Kaczynski contacted the FBI, suspecting that his mentally ill brother was the infamous Unabomber. He then worked closely with the FBI and private detectives for 6 months until ultimately, on April 3, 1996, his brother Ted was arrested at his isolated cabin in Lincoln, Montana. Since that day, David did everything he could to keep his brother away from the death penalty. After succeeding, he took a stand against the death penalty by joining an organization that would eventually lead to the abolishment of the death penalty in New York. David also began speaking around the country, spreading awareness for mental illnesses and how people affected with them are treated in the justice system. Throughout the 1990s, domestic terrorism began to grow and slowly take over the country. In 1995, the year the Unabomber Manifesto was released, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols set off a car bomb in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, a government building in Oklahoma City. The bombing occurred on the 2-year anniversary of the Waco siege, as a retaliation against the government for the way they handled the siege. Then in 1996, the year the Unabomber was arrested, the Centennial Olympic Park bombing occurred during the Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia. The perpetrator, Eric Rudolph, would soon be sent to the same prison as Ted Kaczynski, ADX Florence in Florence, Colorado. It was a rough time in the United States. Throughout his life, Ted Kaczynski was always thought of as different. His brother David often asked the question, "Mommy, what's wrong with Teddy?" Although he was nothing short of a genius, he was also a loner and a very isolated person. In 1971, at the age of 29, Ted moved into a remote cabin he built himself a few miles south of Lincoln, Montana, with the help of his brother. David and his parents were concerned about him because he had become secluded, so they regularly sent him money, unknowingly funding his bombing campaign. He first caught the FBI's attention in 1978 when he mailed his first homemade bomb to Northwestern University. Over the next 17 years, he mailed 15 more bombs like this first one. His first fatality occurred in 1985 in Sacramento, California. After this event, he took a 6-year break until 1993 when he mailed a bomb to a University of California geneticist. At this point, David's wife Linda was following the news story. During this time in the investigation, the FBI theorized the perpetrator was learning from his past bombs and becoming more dangerous. Then, proving this theory, in 1994, his second fatality occurred in North Caldwell, New Jersey. At this point, the FBI still didn't have any leads in the case, and David was still not aware of the possible connection. Unfortunately, in 1995, the last bomb Ted mailed killed a timber industry lobbyist in Sacramento, California. The FBI's first break was in late 1995 when the Unabomber mailed his manifesto to major media outlets. The New York Times and the Washington Post posted the manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, on September 19, 1995, when David's wife, Linda Kaczynski, first discovered it and read it, and in turn asked David to read it. The published manifesto would greatly impact the rest of the Kaczynski family. With the manifesto published for all to see, David Kaczynski suspected his brother Ted could be the Unabomber. To test this theory, David reread letters from Ted dating back to the early 1970s in which Ted protested against the use of technology. There were frightening similarities. Private investigator Susan Swanson was hired by David to discreetly investigate Ted's activities. Armed with the manifesto, Ted's letters, and Susan's findings, David and Linda made the painful decision to take a stand and turn in Ted in order to save lives.
Ultimately, we thought Well, we're the only people who could stop the violence.
Right.
We're the only people, if Ted is the Unabomber, we're the only people who know him well enough to stop him. We were morally obliged to do that. Right. And certainly don't regret that decision.
David hired a Washington, D.C. attorney to organize the evidence. With the attorney on board, they contacted and turned everything over to the FBI. The FBI examined the evidence and followed the necessary steps to secure a search warrant of Ted's cabin. At this point, David was told by the FBI that he would remain anonymous and his brother would not learn who turned him in. But David's identity was soon leaked to CBS News, who contacted the FBI and said they would release David's name. On April 3, 1996, FBI agents arrested Ted at his remote cabin in Montana. Ted's lawyers attempted an insanity defense to save his life, but Ted himself rejected the plea. David took a stand to turn his brother in to save lives, and now Ted's life was at stake. David decided to take a related stand to saving lives and became an anti-death penalty activist in hopes of saving Ted's life as well as others. After Ted's arrest, David watched in dismay and terror as the justice system focused its priorities on taking a human life, his brother's. David worked tirelessly to save his brother's life because the Kaczynski family felt as if the prosecutors did not care that Ted was mentally ill with paranoid schizophrenia. Eventually, Ted was sentenced to life without parole in January 1998. Also in 1998, David began an apprenticeship with forensic psychiatrist Philip J. Resnick, who was involved in the Unabomber case. With Dr. Resnick's help, David became more familiar with mental illnesses and psychology. Working with Dr. Resnick helped David understand what was going through his brother's mind. In 2001, David was named the director of the New Yorkers Against the Death Penalty, a group of individuals who seek abolition of capital punishment. After leading a successful statewide campaign to end New York's capital punishment system, David focused the organization's energy on assisting those directly affected by the issue. He would often speak at universities to discuss the death penalty and tell his story. Part of his story involved having to prove to the court that although his brother did evil things, he was not evil, he was sick. While publicly standing up against the death penalty, he also spread awareness of mental illnesses. David's brave stand came about from a painful personal situation with Ted's horrific crimes and ended up publicly serving a greater community. Because of David Kaczynski, many lives were saved. The Unabomber would have continued mailing bombs if David didn't act quickly and turn his brother in. David's brave stand also provided closure for the families of the victims. They finally knew who killed or injured their loved ones. Anxious people who had been afraid a bomb might arrive at the university they attend could relax. The FBI were grateful because David helped to save lives and end the most expensive FBI case at that time, which saved manpower and funding for other investigations. David took a stand when he turned his brother Ted into the FBI, but that was not his only stand that impacted others. In 2001, David was named the executive director of the New Yorkers Against the Death Penalty. His hard work and dedication with the organization had a long-lasting impact on the state of New York. The death penalty was abolished in New York in 2007. The organization's work is still impactful today because they help families affected by the death penalty. Also, David raised public awareness and improved how the justice system views mentally ill criminals.
It come to find out that not only are we executing people with serious mental illnesses, but they're really disadvantaged in this. If they don't fully understand the legal system, the end result is that we're killing those people because they're not getting adequate defense, they're not getting a fair shake within the system.
The Kaczynski name will forever be attached to Ted as the Unabomber, but because of David's hard work, determination, and dedication, the family name would also be associated with positives. David's stand helped to abolish the death penalty in New York and convince the justice system to factor people's mental illnesses into the criminal investigation and trial process. Along with this positive, he also raised awareness for better treatment options for mentally ill people. David was brave, and through his hard work, dedication, and determination, he saved many lives.